All right, welcome to the first meeting of the advisory season. Thank you everyone for coming. I guess we need to start with a roll call. So just to let everyone know who's here. Jonathan Hurwitz.
Yep, present.
David Lutz.
Present.
Brian Beachkowski.
Present.
Michael Huff.
Present.
Kiara Moore.
She's still connecting to audio.
All right, we'll skip her. Kristen Baelish.
Here.
Jackie Katz.
Present.
And Jamil Siddiqui.
Present.
All right, welcome everyone. Tonight's agenda is going to be discussing articles 2 through 13, which are the bulk of the town articles. I'd like to start with Blythe with an overall view of the town budget, and then we can move on to police, fire, and DPW in whatever order they wish to appear. And then we'll have a question and answers. Honestly, I think it's just easier to have question and answers as we go along if they're important enough. If not, we can have question and answers in between each presenter. And then we can have a discussion at the end. Does that work for everyone? Okay. All right.
Hi, Susan. Thanks. Let me start by sharing my screen. Host says host disabled participant screen sharing. So can somebody?
It's open.
There we go. All right.
And as always, if you're not speaking, if you could mute so that we don't hear any background noise while Blythe is presenting, that would be great. Thank you.
So I'm going to do this in conjunction with the police chief, fire chief, and DPW. This is actually a fairly short presentation of the highlights. I'm going to go through the overview of revenues and expenditures and some changes. And then each one of them has a couple of slides to talk about what's going on with their departments. And then, so sure, bring us questions if you have them as we go along or at the end, whichever is best for everyone. And joining me tonight, of course, also is Todd Lindmark, the finance director, who without him, I could not do all of this. He's done a great job. So here we go. So when we sat together a year ago and spent many meetings figuring out what the FY21 budget would be, there's a lot of unknowns and a lot of concern. We had, before COVID really took hold, we had a priority set by the select board to really look at the budget carefully and look at how we could trim it back a bit and still manage services. And so we started with a budget, which quickly then took about, I say 87 versions. I think Todd says it's a few more that we all worked together on until we passed the budget in June. And when we did that, we really made some significant changes because we just weren't sure what was going to happen. You know, would taxes get paid? Would if restaurants were closed, what did that mean for meals tax? Would anyone pull a building permit? Would that all stop? What was the state going to do? And as we know, they didn't pass their budget until October. So we cut back a lot. And a year later, it's heartwarming to tell you that, you know, while there is definitely difficulty in the country in various places and revenue loss has been a problem, it didn't really shape up that way here in Norfolk. The things that we reduced, we found that except for meals tax, really stayed on track. Tax collections, excise taxes, building permits are off the charts. And compared to recent years, there's increases in state aid. And so we are bringing you a budget that overall on the revenue side is a 3.93% increase from last year. I won't get into too many details, but overall, there's both new growth, a little higher than last year. In fact, FY21 was higher than we've had in the last few years. We're not suggesting we go that high again, but it's higher than we've typically budgeted. The typical 2.5% increase in the levy, various increases in local receipts such as excise, which is tracking higher than we planned. And as I mentioned, building permits. So overall, as I say, that increase is just under 4% and worth $1,589,000. And just to take a deeper dive into state aid, both of the major state grant accounts are up over last year, both Chapter 70 school aid and then unrestricted government aid. That one's up 3.5%, which is tracking with state income tax collections. I think we all were concerned, gee, was that really gonna be a possibility? And even I was concerned into the fall with how is that tracking? And in fact, it's done better than they had anticipated. So on the screen, you can see those two increases. You can see charter school tuition exemptions. State-owned land is interestingly up over about $38,000, and the assessments, which were a big factor in FY21, are relatively the same as last year. So on this particular area, that increase is up 1.7%. And so just to kind of go over the highlights again, our new growth is on track and real estate is on track. Motor vehicle up 50 grand, and we feel comfortable budgeting that for next year. Building permits, as I mentioned, busiest they've been in quite a while, and outlook for the future, both in what's happening with homes and with 40B projects and permits for those. We feel comfortable slightly increasing that revenue line as well. One area that we are reducing is meals tax. It's not clear how long the pandemic will impact restaurants getting back to what they'd like to be able to do. And so we're suggesting a slight reduction in that just to be on the safe side. So I mentioned the state aid increases in the governor's budget. And right now, this budget doesn't contemplate the use of any free cash or prison mitigation funds. Last year, we did use about $124,000 of free cash. And it's been our goal to get to the point where we're not using that and we can save that for other uses. And prison mitigation funds did actually come in earlier this calendar year, not expected at all, and we hadn't budgeted for it. But again, we're recommending that we don't budget that next year. It's still an unreliable source of revenue, and I would like to think it will come in. Part of the strategy long-term is to not budget every penny that we might expect, so that we can make sure that we have free cash. We have a lot of capital needs that we're going to need to address the next couple of years. We should be, putting money into stabilization and OPEB and those sorts of things. And we want to make sure we're positioning the town to be, continue to be strong in the future. So looking at the overview of the proposed budget, we are at just $44,800,000 and a little more than that. And overall, that's an increase of 3.52%. This budget includes all of the requests made by each of the school districts at what they had requested, and KP certified at their meeting on the other night. And it includes what we're going to talk about for the various departments. There's only two items that are not spread into particular line items right now, and those are at the bottom. It says add ClearGov and COLAs for $51,000. We are at the end of our two contracts with unions, the Public Works Union and the Clerical Union, and up for renegotiations for a successor contract. So we've put in this line item what we think we may need to settle that contract, but we haven't spread it through the various departments that would be affected. And then the one kind of new initiative that we are want to pursue is IT subscription program. The company that we're looking into is called ClearGov. They have been around in business in Hopkinton for about 8 to 10 years, and they do a very good job of taking what can be, difficult to follow if you're not on the advisory committee, information about municipal budgets, and make it, turn them into charts and graphs and metrics that make it really easy for your residents to consume and understand how their tax dollar gets spent, how it compares to towns like us. They have a terrific tool to help you keep people abreast of projects such as the fire station coming up or the Southwood Hospital. And they also have an area of it that helps you build charts and graphs and all sorts of useful tables and such to help people understand the metrics of departments. And I'll use police as an example. With someone who doesn't have a lot of technical skill can build, say, a bar chart or a pie chart to help people understand how over time we're doing in terms of crime statistics or 911 calls, and get a better sense of what we spend our money on and how we're busy and how we're compared to communities like us. So that's $13,000 the first year, and it drops down after that once you get going. But that's something that we've got a priority for next year. So since most of you have been through the budget process and we sent you you've got the working copy that you're very familiar with, we haven't scripted a lot of other presentation slides to go through details of the budget at this point. What we'd like to do is I'd like to turn it over to the police chief and his staff. There's 2 slides to go over their salaries and expense budget. Overall, the increase is 6%, which seems a little, higher than would normally be. And we wanted to go through the details of that with you. And then following that, Deputy Chief Petruchek is here to talk about fire. And then the DPW Director Blair Crane and Barry Liverbeer, his assistant, are here to talk about DPW. And then I'll come back and wrap it up. So happy to take any questions right now, or we can jump right into police.
I have a quick question. This is David. So in the state aid section, you have state-owned land, and then what's the difference between the prison mitigation and the state-owned land? Is the prison mitigation just for operational stuff, or is there some underlying property tax pilot stuff going on there too?
I'm going to take a crack at it and then turn it over to Todd. But prison mitigation is specifically because you've got a prison in your community. Walpole in recent years typically gets the first 800,000 of whatever is in the state budget, and the other towns that have prisons divvy up with the balance of what's budgeted. Conversely, we also have other state-owned land that's not prisons, and other communities do. And so what the state does is, rather than pay you taxes on it, they give you a payment in lieu of that for what they determine is a value of that land that's not being used for any other purpose except a state park or whatever it happens to be.
So,
Does that help?
yeah, it does. So the prison mitigation, I mean, the state-owned land could include what's the land under the prison?
In our case, they may have an overlap, and I'm not sure about that. And
Okay.
I'll ask Todd if he happens to know the answer to that.
I'm not 100% sure on if there's an overlap with respect to that, but again, prison mitigation is based on prisons itself.
Number of prisoners,
prisoners that are there. And then
Okay.
the land itself is a formula based on the actual state-owned land, which I assuming includes the prison.
Right.
I
Okay,
can verify.
thank you.
It's quick follow-up on the prison mitigation funds. You said they came in last year, but it wasn't planned, or wasn't, well, let me rephrase, it wasn't budgeted or expected to come last year?
So when we set the budget last June, we put a 0 in for that because we had no expectation the state was going to be able to fund it at that point. And when we met for the town meeting in November, we still didn't know. And so it wasn't money that we had and we could account for and share. It didn't come in until, I don't know, January or February. Todd, do you recall?
The end of January, and we can't do anything with monies that come in this year until they get certified at the June 30th close.
So
How much was it that came in?
Let me look that up. I'll be right back.
So the good news, if you want to call it that, is that that will go to free cash at the end of this year and will, put us in a situation to be able to address other needs come the fall. Todd, I want to say it's about 270,000 if I recall, but I'm not sure of the exact amount.
I think it's just under that. Yep. But give me a minute. I got to log in and I'll get it. I'll get you
That's
back.
fine. I know pending the answer or verification of the amount, did you say 170,000 or
270.
270? Okay. So I realize we haven't gotten into all the details and discussion of what may be forthcoming, but to me, it seems strange we're going to be asking for an increase of 71,000 for the budget next year. Got an unexpected 270 for prison mitigation funds, but we wouldn't be using that money to offset this increase in the budget, but just sticking all of that into free cash. So I guess the root of the question is, why would we stick all of that into free cash as opposed to taking 71,467 out of that amount, addressing the budget increase and putting the balance into free cash?
So Jonathan, the 71,467 is a change in the anticipated revenues that we're going to receive.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm looking at revenues. All right. So what's I'm on the wrong slide. So what's the budget increase for next year?
The overall budget increase is proposed to be
3.5%.
3.5.
Okay. So same question. I'm sorry. I was reading the wrong numbers, but the same question applies. Why would we stick the entirety of the 270K of prison mitigation funds into free cash as opposed to addressing some percentage of that 3.5% increase?
Well, because we got it so late, it's not certified. We can't spend it this year. We still have money in free cash that is certified, and that is a choice we could make to spend some of that. But we've got some significant capital costs coming. I mean, just listening to the school's presentation of the budget, 2 weeks ago or whenever it was, they have a need for 125,000 in new technology every year for the next 5 years, and we need to be able to prepare for those when they come along. So it goes into free cash. We have a bigger balance that we can really attack some of that capital in the fall. So we see it as a good thing. I mean, it was great it came in and we didn't plan for it. We tightened our belt this year, but we'll be better able to address those things rather than what's the truck that we can't get to even start, and we're only taking care of the absolute worst stuff. We'll be able to start to make a dent in some of these issues.
And to follow up with that, Jonathan, we typically trying to get off of utilizing the free cash or monies that would be identified as free cash in the budget, because you don't want to use those particular items for one-time purposes. You want recurring revenues to help out with the recurring expenses.
I know. I mean, we've discussed this for years,
Sure.
and I understand that. And perhaps this is just a contrarian position, but I do recall having the same position this time last year when we were discussing it. I think given the state of the economy, and even though your comments say perhaps in Norfolk we weren't as affected as other places in the country, my perspective on that is some of us were. I think on the whole, perhaps the town, if you average it out, may not have been hit as hard, but that's certainly not true for everybody. But if we're going to be increasing the town's budget by 3.5%, that's going to affect everybody. That's not simply going to affect the people who haven't been affected in the economy this past year. That's going to share the burden across everybody in town. So I can appreciate the philosophical approach of free cash and capital expenditures and those sorts of things. But I do think last year and certainly this upcoming year are unusual times, and unusual times may call for unusual measures. And I think from again, a philosophical approach, I would advocate for using more of the money we may have on hand to try and offset increased tax bills for people, in light of the fact that there have been a good number of people in town affected and probably aren't going to have the stomach for a tax bill increase. So I realized I jumped kind of in early on that, but I just wanted to kind of draw the line with the prison mitigation funds, especially given that they weren't planned or expected, but came in.
And on the prison mitigation, the number was 273,017.
Blythe,
Thank you.
Sure.
Blythe, this is Susan.
Mhm.
Just to touch on Jonathan's concerns. So we still have the existing rainy day and the existing free cash that we had last year, and now we're adding another 270. Do you have any of that earmarked already? Not as a line item in this budget per se, but knowing that you're going to spend it on something, any percentage of it at all going to be spent in FY 2022?
Well, first of all, we have to finish FY21. We've overspent the snow and ice budget. I don't know the exact amount at this point. We will have some.
100,000.
Okay, so free cash will need to be spent on that. I understand that we have a problem with too much leachate coming out of the landfill we're overspent in the budget. So we're going to have some expenses we have to address this spring. And then I didn't bring the capital budget home with me, but I think you all have a copy. And there is a whole list of things in FY22 that we have down, and I know that we can't begin to afford them all, but this gives us a better chance to, like I said, make a dent in some of those. I just don't have a list for you off the top of my head.
Okay, I think that's what I was trying to figure out, that if you're, I think part of Jonathan's concern, and I don't mean to speak for him, but is that just leaving, which is what our concern was last year. We understand the credit rating. We've had these discussions a lot of times, but we both feel, at least we have in the past, that leaving the money solely in free cash and in the rainy day fund, when there are things that it needs to be spent on, there are things that we could be addressing. As long as I understand you can't do anything about it yet, but as long as you have the plan to actually use some of that money to offset some things like capital or schools or whatever it may be.
Oh, sure. I mean, roads, 3 police cars, school technology, the 22-year-old boiler at Town Hall that we hope doesn't die. I mean, there are definite needs.
Would your plan be to pass this budget in the spring and then use some of that at fall town meeting to?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
And again, I don't mean to speak for Jonathan. I just was trying to ask that question on top of
Good question.
Okay.
So any other questions on the overview? All right, I'm gonna slide back down and turn it over to Chief Stone. Hey, Chief.
Hey. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for the work that you do. It's a daunting task, and no thanks. And thanks for the new members that are coming on the advisory board. So getting right into it, the police department, I started out last night, said that the police department has 21 full-time officers, 2 administrative staff, and we have 12 reserve officers. So one of the things that has been going on for several years, we've had a lot of retirements. So 14 of our 21 officers have 8 years or less on the job. 9 of those 14 have 3 years or less. So that's quite a bit. So it's part of the reason that the deputy and I are still around, because we, believe it or not, we have some institutional knowledge of what has gone on in town for the last 45 years or so. So it's good to pass that on before we actually walk out the door in a year and a half, which would be the final day we could possibly work. So that's part of the reason why we're still here. But anyways, leading up to last year's budget, we've found that we were going to be at a 0% increase. And we were able to accomplish that by the fact that we had 3 long-term employees that were at the top of the pay scale that retired in the early part of the fiscal So that was one of the reasons we were able to get through last year with a 0% increase. And that money that we might have asked for was able to go to others who needed it just as much, if not more. We had savings in base salary, vacation leave replacement, holiday pay, college incentive appropriately through the budget. So the problem this year is combining 2 years worth of collective bargaining agreements into 1 year of appropriation basically has counted for a little bit larger increase than we would normally have if we had spread it out over the 2 years. As you'll see on the thing, the COLA and the contractual steps, the steps, a lot of contracts that you see have, you might call them lane changes. We just call them steps. And then on top of the lane changes, they might have a COLA. Well, as the contracts that we have that we're working from now have a 3% increase on the each of those steps. So that accounts for about 19,700 of that 74,150 you see on the screen. And the remainder is the COLA, the 54,450 is the 3%. So there's 10 steps in the patrolman's contract, and it maxes out at the 29th year. So, you know, there's a difference in that. And we have it in there. There's an anticipated retirement in this next year. Possibly. I'm not saying that he's actually going to have, he might just make it through to the July one. But I have to budget for it. That budget line has been in there since I can recall it being in there in the early 80s. It might have been even in the late 70s because it was a contractual award that was given out in lieu of something else, maybe a lesser cost of living increase way back then. So now it's better to fund it and not have a spike. So it's been there. If you look back and the budget's been there every single year. Educational incentive is the next line that's up there, the 19,250. This is, some of you might know, this is the third year of the collective bargaining agreement for the patrol officers and sergeants. And in that, it says that we were going to bring everybody to the same level of educational incentive. Because about 10 years ago, and I'm ballparking that, but about 10 years ago, they had a collective bargaining agreement where they froze it at a certain level and reduced it for new employees. Everybody else was grandfathered. So we decided that for retention purposes, we want to make sure we're able to keep the good officers that we're hiring. We decided it was decided and bargained for that they would make it all the same. The next one is in service. Now, 18 of the 21 officers go to in-service training. Yeah, everybody has to do in-service, but 18 of them, we have to find a way to replace them if we send them away to in-service training, because we still need the same amount of people on the road, even though we send that person who might be on that shift is going to the training. We have to put someone else in his place. So we have to backfill most of those positions. Most of you know that the police reform bill did pass. If anyone tells you that it's not going to cost you any more money for training, then that's probably an error. It's probably going to cost you more to send people away to training or to have more training because you can't leave the shift bare. So you have to have somebody working. You have to have somebody sitting either in front of a computer screen or going to the location where the training is. So, and we cover a lot of courses. Of course, we have 40 hours of in-service training anyways. We have for as long as I can remember. We're going back to probably 1982. They started that 40 hours of in-service. But they get trained yearly on the OUI, breathalyzer, defibrillator, the Taser, firearms training, use of force, and then there's multiple other trainings that are going to come and others from the police reform. So we have to take them all, and we will. And everybody that works in Norfolk really enjoys taking additional training. So it's not a bad thing. It's actually probably going to be a good thing. I have other contractual costs of holidays in court. Holiday pay is something that's done in Massachusetts. In most of your businesses, if there's a holiday during the week, you probably only work 4 of the 5 days. And in our business, we're scheduled for and probably do work all 5 days of the week. So what happens is there's a statute that says that if you're scheduled to work, you shall be replaced, or you should be given an additional day of pay. That's been going on for as long as I've been on the job. So as I said, this is my 45th year. I don't even know when that law went into effect, but that's the way it is. So there's and in the collective bargaining agreement, you're going to find that there's 11 holidays that have to be replaced. So times 18, that's what it happens. But and actually it's 21. Everybody is entitled to an additional day's pay for a holiday. Vacations, as I said, 3 of those that retired in early. One retired just before the end of the fiscal year of 20, and 2 retired during the summer of fiscal year 21. So that actually dropped our vacation replacement from 70 days to 30 days. So that was a saving of 40 days by those officers retiring. And so the reflection on that is that you would save money in replacement costs, because one of the only thing that they have first refusal on in the collective bargaining agreement is vacation days. So right now there's probably 340 or so, 350 days of vacation that have to be replaced on a yearly basis. And we pick a number in the middle of the salary range of time and a half, and that's what we plug in as that number, and you'll see it in the vacation line of the budget that's been forwarded to you. The last one is administrative staff, and the COLA. I have two women that work in our office and do all of the work that needs to be done there. And that has not yet been completed, as Blythe said earlier. We're waiting for that contract to be negotiated for next year, but I put in at 2.5% just to hold as a placeholder, because I don't know what it's going to be, and that'll be adjusted at a later time. The next slide is expenses. And that one there, Lieutenant Shannon is going to take that and run it through. And if I have to fill in, I can fill in as needed.
Okay, so we're requesting funding to purchase 35 new tasers. Currently, we have 35 tasers. 8 of them are functioning, but not at full service. 4 of them are completely out of service. So our proposal is to start a subscription service, or subscribe to a subscription service with the Taser. And by joining that subscription service, we'll save $1,000 per unit over the 5-year term of the subscription service. So we would be getting 35 tasers, cartridges, a warranty, target stand, docking station, training and certification, and it comes out to a cost of $2,622 per unit. If we were to buy the units individually without the subscription service, they are at $1,450 each, $345 for a warranty, $69 for a holster, $86 for a battery. Additional cartridges are $152. It would come out to $3,600 per unit at the end of the 5 years. So therefore, we're requesting the funding for the 5-year subscription service.
So one of the things we talked about with the Taser, we're trying to spread the distance for the use of force model. And the Taser has been very effective. I know many of you know that we have for years, going back to my first year, worked at the Patriots games, and we have them on our belt. They're a very bright yellow, and I can tell you that when they see them there, they just say, "Yeah, no, I'm all set. Where do you want me to go? I don't need to. I'm all done fighting. I'm all done arguing with this guy. We're not messing around with that." I mean, most of you know what a taser will do. It shoots 2 darts at the person who won't comply in any way, shape, or form after you've given them instruction to do so, and it provides a 50,000 jolt for 5 seconds. Typically, that person goes down to the ground. I don't know if any of you have done any electrical work at your house, replace a light switch or something. Touching those 2 wires together, it's not even close to the same. Anyone we've ever dealt with over there or in Norfolk, believe it or not, they give up first before they want to be tased. So, as I said, I'm trying to comply with what's gone on across the country. Massachusetts is not as bad as some of the things that have happened across the country, but we're still trying to address and make sure that we have one more thing on the officer's tool belt before we get to the final thing. And we try not very hard not to get to that, and we have not yet since I've been here. So that's one of the reasons we would want that taser. But we have a couple. He said there was 8 of them that will still shoot a dart at someone, but you can't read the screen. It doesn't tell you which dart's activated. It won't tell you whether the battery's got enough charge to even activate it. So, it's and the other 4 just stop working. So we have 12 that are pretty much ready to go. So we got to start replacing them. If we did that on say somebody says, well, why don't you buy it at say $7 a year? Well, as the lieutenant said, it's going to cost you about $1,000 more per unit than it would for the other one. And you will have probably, as you know, like everything, cars, computers, cell phones, they're all different over the 5-year period. In this case, the way the lieutenant described it, we get them all the very first day we sign up for the program. And that's everything we're going to need. And everybody's got the same, which is an issue with accreditation. Say everybody should have the same unit. Cars should be the same. Tasers should be the same. Weapons should be the same. Should be able to interchange at will. So that's the story, longer than you probably wanted, but it is what it is on the taser. And I'm told that Blythe is going to talk about the Police Chief Assessment Center.
Thank you, Chief. So as Chief mentioned, both he and the Deputy Chief are due to retire in about 1.5 years. And that's going to be a significant change with about 80 years of experience walking out the door. So we have, as I'm sure you can appreciate, choice of a police chief or a fire chief is incredibly important one in a community. And one of the tools that we typically use is an assessment center where you bring in an outside firm who doesn't have any relationship with us or the candidates, and you put together an assessment of their skills in various areas and helps give you a very good understanding of how that person will handle difficult situations and be a leader in the community. So we did the same thing. We hired Chief Kinney. I think that was a successful outcome. And so this is approximately what we spent then. And we would undertake this in the early spring of next year so that we can be ready to have his replacement named as he retires sometime over that summer of FY23. Chief, back to you for just a couple of points, last points.
Okay. Keep this one a little bit shorter than last night, but the department leases contracts and software. Most of that has to do with equipment that we use and the new station. So a lot of the equipment, some of it we got with grants, which we got the live scan fingerprint scanner was a $20,000 grant that we applied for and received. But the maintenance agreement had a one-year warranty. Now it's on us. So it comes about in this next fiscal year. So we're going to have to cover some of those things. As there's a lot of things on that list, but the biggest one, the radio repeaters, obviously you want those to work. I could go. It's a pretty long list, but we're asking for a little bit more money to cover the things that expired in this past year. And like I said, when in this, the collective bargaining agreement tells me that I have to spend they get $1,300 a year to buy new uniform or equipment, and so the times is 21. And I have reserve officers, so and obviously we're going to have to start putting new uniforms on 2 new people who will be replacing the deputy and I, because we want to get them started working as a reserve officer prior to us leaving, so that we get a little bit more money there. And uniform cleaning is the other one, and that has to do with the collective bargaining agreement again. So that's pretty much where I am.
Any questions for Chief Stone?
Chief, this is Dave Lutz. I'm just,
Hey, Dave.
I can't remember what the outcome was last spring. Is the upgrade of your radios coming back in the fall, or what did we do last fall with the radio upgrades?
We are, I believe it right now, we are at full.
Okay, all right.
Get all the
That's what I
rest of the
thought.
radios.
Yeah, okay, that's what I thought. I just wanted to
We
make
did,
sure.
we had to do that in a phase 2-year program, and we did get that done.
Okay.
And we utilized a grant. Part of it was a grant. At the same time, the DPW got 3 radios, the emergency management, yeah, so it's done.
Thank you. Just wanted to check. Thanks.
No, thank you. We needed new radios, so yes, that was good.
Chief Stone,
Go ahead.
quick diligence question. So why is 35 tasers the right number for 21 officers?
Okay, so we have 21 officers, we have 12 reserves, there's 33, and we've wanted two spares. As you can see right now, we have 4 that will not work anymore, and we were relying on our spares. And so we're sharing between officers, but if you had everybody out there, somebody's going to be short, so that's why.
Thanks, I forgot about the reserve.
Yep.
Hi, Chief Stone. This is Kristen Balish. Can you hear
Hey,
me?
Kristen.
I had some questions about some items that were increases, and I'm curious why they were increases and not flat. So for uniform replacements and cleaning increases, was that due to more officers or the bargaining agreement allowing for higher costs from a prior year?
The bargaining agreement has an increase in it for a uniform replacement. And then, as I said, we're going to be getting some newer officers, and we need to put them in uniform before we put them on the street. So it's $4,800. I think probably it's $1,800 of it is, oh no, it's a little bit more, because it's $2,100 of it is an increase for the rest of the full timers.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to make sure. I just wanted to ask why it wasn't flat. That makes sense to me. I think my other question was about the retirement sick time, which is a larger number. I may have misheard, but you had said something to the effect of this is kind of in every year's budget. You can remember.
If you go back, you will see that it's in there every single year for retirement. Yes.
So my question is, why is there an increase? Why is it not just the same number as last year? If it's in there every year, why is it an increase versus just carrying forward?
That number is married to the daily rate of pay for the person who's in there.
Got it.
So.
Okay, so the number, there's always a number there, but the number will always change based on their new rate.
Right.
Okay.
It's a section of I have a worksheet that I developed, and it's a section there, and I just put the person's hourly rate in there, times 8, times 40, whatever. How
So
many
it's the same
days.
item, just different amounts based. Yep, totally get it. Thank you
Yep.
so much.
So go back to the clothing. I don't know if any of you have ever looked at police equipment and uniforms. They are ridiculously expensive. Pants and shirts, well over $100, and it's ridiculous. They got you, so they charge. The cheaper items are believe it or not, it might be a weapon compared to shirts and jackets. I mean, by the time you get a patches sewn on, or hash marks, or whatever else you might put on a jacket or shirt, it gets to be an expensive item. And we actually can't. We start them out with a shirt, a long sleeve shirt, a short sleeve shirt, a pair of pants, and then the leather gear that you see on the belt, and all that. And that's all I can afford in the first year. Maybe and a jacket, and obviously a hat. So that's it. It just runs out quickly.
Oh, and sorry, my last question was about the holidays and court costs. Again, it's a small number, so I hate to nitpick, but why is that an increase if it's holidays and court costs? Are those not the same every year, or is it again based on the rate of pay for people?
Part of it is probably going to be the 3% cost of living increase that they got. And if some of them had a step or a lane change during that year because of how many years they've been on. In the early part, it's a 1-year break between the first 5 years. And then after they get to the 10th, it's every 5 years.
Okay. Yep. So it's the value of that pay increasing, not the number of days or number of people. Got it.
11 days for all 21. So, so multiply that out, and then everybody's individual rate. So it's a math exercise for me every year to give it to you. So.
Yep. And that's actually not that much. So thank you for explaining.
No problem.
Any other questions for the chief?
Yeah. Hi, Chief Stone. My name is Kiara Moore. I was reading through the preliminary budget document, and it mentioned that the budget as proposed would include the loss of a patrol officer, but I didn't see that here. So just wanted to get some clarification.
Chief, let me take that for you.
Okay.
So when we first put the budget together in late January, early February, we were operating under the assumption that the select board wanted to see, again, as they did last year, what a 0 budget increase would mean and a 3% budget increase before we had a good understanding of where the revenue picture looked like. And so if we had to go to a 0 budget, the chief was going to lose at least 1 position. This is what we would call a level service budget. It's not at 3%. It's higher for the reasons we've just talked about, but that's the difference. I apologize if that was confusing.
Perfect. No, thanks, Blythe. And then my other question, Blythe, I think is also for you. I'm still new to town, so I wasn't here when we picked Chief Kenny. But for the chief committee that you mentioned that it's mostly external folks. Are there town representatives as well in that committee?
So it wasn't a committee per se. It would be an outside firm who's got the expertise to put together this program to help to put the candidates that we think are the best ones forward to demonstrate their skills in various situations and help us get a good picture of who will be the most well-rounded candidate to be the next chief. What happens with this position by the bylaws is appointed. My recommendation, the select board ratify the appointment. So we would advertise the job. We would interview candidates. Myself and I would have other team members help me, probably bring in an outside chief to help with that as well. And then once we get down to finalists, we would use these funds to run that process, and out of that, pick the person that we want to recommend to the board.
Thank you.
Are we ready for Peter?
Chief Stone, I just have one quick question.
Yes. Hi, Sue.
Hi, how are you? Can you I just want to make sure when people ask that I always explain things correctly. With the Taser program, what this means is you're going to each officer will receive a new Taser, and because it's a paid program, it's going to be a yearly expense of $20,000.
Yes.
Okay, but what that means is same way it is with, say, Microsoft or anything else that you join, as it breaks or as they need updates, they're just going to replace them.
Right.
Totally.
Yep. And we'll get 35 the very first day we sign up for the program. Everybody gets a new one.
And then
yes, it's a similar amount for each year.
Okay, so then we just pay a set amount every year and they replace them in perpetuity.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
I would just add that in order to start the program, it's $9,000 when we initially sign, and that will be a transfer at this spring's town meeting. And then the 20 will be in the budget the years following as a flat amount.
What happens to our current set of tasers?
They're going to be traded in. The subscription service offers a trade-in value for the current tasers. That's why the first year is 9,000 as opposed to 20,000.
Great, thank you.
So as most of you know, we got some, we split that into two parts, and we got like half the department in 2012 and the other half in 2013. And they give a life like they give every item that you can possibly buy of 5 to 6 years. We're beyond that if you do the math. So.
Right, can you just clarify, these are mainly used as a deterrent, or how often would you say in a single year you're using it on somebody?
So Chief, I'll take that.
Okay.
So every time we arrive at a scene of a situation, you know, in addition to our presence, we have the omnipresence of the taser. Some of you have had experience and seen it on YouTube or on in the news back in several years ago was "Don't tase me, bro." So they have a very strong reputation to succumb an individual if necessary. So the Norfolk police have had deployments. In 2011, we had no deployments. 2013, we had 2. 2014, we had 4 deployments. 2015, we had 1. 2016, we had 2. Actually, in 2021, just yesterday, we had a deployment. And the benefit of being able to use a taser as opposed to going hands-on with someone is that it's safer for the individual and for the officer as well. It's a quantified level of force, and it's a person's less likely to be permanently injured by using a taser as opposed to a nightstick or even mace, a chemical agent.
So Jackie, one of the things that it talks about is that once we deploy the taser and both leads hit the individual, it automatically gives that shock of 50,000 volts. You have 5 seconds to move in and handcuff the individual. And we've had enough training with it where we do that. That's part of the training. Being able to hit, because it has a laser dot that you aim at the person, and that's what that makes sure that you have both leads. Each cartridge has 2 leads in it, and the 2 leads have to hit the person. And yet we have 2 cartridges in case, as you know, if someone moves, one of the leads might miss the person. So you have to use the other cartridge. And as long as there's 2 leads touching, it'll activate and make the 50,000 volts work. And then you can go in and do your job, and reduces injuries, long-term injuries, people being out with a bad back, a broken leg, or an arm. I've seen that in numerous things happen. One thing that we didn't say, we called it deployments. Well, a deployment, if you just break the leather and take it out of the holster at all, that counts as a deployment in today's worlds for the rules that we have to follow. So we might not actually use the taser, but we just might bring it out, and the person sees it and says, "Yeah, I'm done." And that's usually, most of the time, that's what happens. Hopefully that answers your question.
Are we ready to move on to fire?
Yes, I think so.
Okay, great. So we just have only one slide for you tonight because there's no change in the expense budget for the fire department. All the changes are in the salary line items. I'll turn it over to the deputy chief.
Hi, good evening. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for having us. Standing in for Chief Kinney tonight. The fire department is requesting about a 6% increase for their budget for FY22. The increase is predominantly driven by the collective bargaining agreement with firefighters. In July of this year, we'll be entering into the final year of a 3-year agreement. So over the course of the last 3 years, we've had a 3.5% increase for the firefighters over the course of that time. For this year, it equates to about $70,000. The other driver with regards to the increase in the budget would be our percent or change of the SAFER grant. As you guys, I think, are all aware, last year, about a year ago right now, we started our first year of a SAFER grant that we received from the federal government to hire 2 new firefighter paramedics. The total amount for that grant was $400,530. The feds kicked in $246,000. The town was responsible for $153,000. The first 2 years of the grant, the feds reimbursed us 75%, with the third year 35%. After that, it'll be the town's responsibility to pick up the cost of those 2 firefighters. So the grant started in March of 2020. We just finished our first year, entering our second year with the 75%. So we will have a percentage of the third year of the grant come due in FY22. Then the reimbursement will only be 35%. Another component in the collective bargaining agreement for the third year, this will be the first year that this will happen, is the firefighters will be eligible to receive time and a half when they work on a holiday. That amounts to about almost $20,000. And then the other 2 components that drive the increase for this year would be 7 firefighters were eligible for 12 additional hours of vacation time. And then due to the pandemic and the carryover of vacation, which started this year, this is, we had to fund that a little bit higher going into the next fiscal year. So those are the basics of what's driving the 6% increase in the fire department budget.
So I have a quick question. In my Air Force job, we do have the vacation carryover, but there is a point where you hit use or lose. Is there a max carryover that your force has as well?
Yeah, generally in the contract, we can carry over up to 48 hours per year. Again, due to the pandemic last year, it was agreed upon that we could carry over 96 hours. And I do believe that this year will be the same. They'll be able to carry over the 96 hours. So what generally we have to do is we have to budget for the potential for the vacation to be taken in the fiscal year that we budget for. But we also have to budget for carryover. Generally what happens when we do that is that money, if they don't use that to be carried over, we will return that money back to the town. It's kind of a variable that, we just historically try to take a guess as to how much carryover will be needed, but we really don't know until the time comes.
Thank you.
Yeah, can I ask a question about that carryover? You indicated you effectively doubled the amount that could be carried over last year because of the pandemic. Do you mind if I ask, was that driven from any financial reason, or was that driven from the fact that people felt like they had less places to or ability to use that time effectively?
Yeah, that's correct. I think that was due to the pandemic and the fact that people were pretty much locked down in their homes. Yep. And I think, and Blythe could correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it was a townwide initiative.
Yes. Yeah.
Is that, I mean, to point that back to you, Blythe, is that going to be the expectation going to next year, is to continue to allow that 96 hours of carryover townwide next year?
So it's not the same in every department or union. For the bulk of employees, we're allowing them to, they usually can carry 1 week of vacation from one year to the next. We're allowing them to carry a second week, but they've got to use it by the end of the first quarter of the year. We don't want it to accumulate beyond that.
Yeah. So if you'll allow me, I have one, it's a non well, I guess it's somewhat budget oriented. I mean, I don't know how exactly it works from the town budget, but obviously when you carry over vacation like that, you've got a liability for that vacation, especially if the rules allow for payout of that if someone leaves. So you've got to kind of carry that on the books. But that aside, I think that's less important. And now I'm speaking from personal experience where I work. I mean, we faced the same things everyone else did. No one used any of the vacation last year, right? And everyone's carrying over everything. The reason being is everyone felt like they had no way to use it. And we're starting to see everyone completely get stressed and burned out because they're not taking any time for themselves. So for what it's worth, my recommendation is I think we should be incentivizing people to start using their vacation, even if it's not in a typical traditional go somewhere on, away for a week type of way. People need to take that time off, especially, I'm only guessing, I haven't worked on that job, but in a high stress position like the fire department, I think it's probably more important in those cases for people to take that time. I think we should be looking to try and incentivize people to use it rather than giving people the ability to carry more and more over, because I understand that position we were in last year, but I think a full year into this, there's no prediction of how long the state we're in may last. So I think, again, from the mental health perspective, trying to encourage use of that vacation time would be beneficial.
No, I agree. I think from the fire department's perspective, I think we're starting to happen, even now. I think a lot more folks are taking, making sure they're taking the time to get away, especially over the winter that we had with the number of COVID cases, especially down at the prison that we had to deal with.
Good, thank you.
Blythe, you said that people were able to roll over 2 weeks, but they have to use by Q1.
They can always, we've always been
Or-
allowed
yeah.
most employees to carry 1 week. For this particular year, just a second week, and asking them to use it in Q1.
Right.
The second week they can use later in the year.
Yep. And to respond to Jonathan's point, my company did a similar thing, which I think, is to have the empathy to say, we're going to let you carry some more over. We understand that this was not a usual year. But I also like that you're pairing it with but we want people to use it in Q1. And hopefully suggesting that we'll make it possible for you to do so as well, so you don't lose it. So I think that's a good approach. And Jonathan, I agree with you in terms of how to kind of present that to staff.
Yep.
And that is in the firefighter contract. They have to use that up by August 31st.
Okay. Great.
Any other questions about fire? Good job, Pete. Thank you.
All right, thank you, everybody.
All right, next up, we'll flip over to DPW. We've got a whole 3 slides here rather than just 1 or 2. And Mr. Crane.
Good evening, everybody. Good evening. Thanks for having me. We'll start out here with slide number 1, as it were. The overall budget increase 4.1% for the DPW this coming year. One of the main drivers for that is to reinstate a superintendent position. In the past, before I became director, the management at the DPW had 5 people, had 2 director and assistant director, and 3 superintendents. I was the highway superintendent until becoming the director. At that point, Barry and I have done our best to hold the fort down, but there are definitely some services DPW wide that fall through the cracks. On a daily basis, Barry and I handle everything from permits, regulatory compliance, emergency operations, whether it be windstorms in the summer or snow in the winter, which can be more often than not an around-the-clock operation, working all night and then working again all day. Daily operations, future projects and planning, whether it's working with engineers or private contractors. Cemetery operations, which obviously takes some time meeting with individuals and so on. So our plan there is to reinstate an overall DPW superintendent to handle the daily operations of the DPW. With the amount of crews that we have in the 5 divisions, we feel that it's prudent that we have one person to be able to coordinate all that, as Barry and I try to focus on other things. Right now, we're trying to juggle them all, and there just aren't enough hours in the day to do that. Beyond that, part of the budget proposal that we have is for funding for engineering for shovel-ready projects. A lot of grants come down the pipe, but most of them require that the town pay for the engineering up front, and that the plans for these projects are, for all intents and purposes, sitting on the shelf, which can either take too long to get the grant, or the grant's gone by the time you get that done. So we're trying to be proactive in some of these infrastructure projects that we have around town. So we would like to be able to fund some of these expenditures. Beyond that, anybody that lives in Norfolk over the past years certainly seen that trees are an issue. Seems like every time the wind blows right through last Saturday night, power goes out, and trees are a real issue. We do what we can on any given year to try to mitigate that as best we can, but they are becoming a bigger issue than we have money to take care of. Barry and I get calls. I would easily say it could be close to a dozen a week in spring, summer, and fall. And we try to do what we can, but certainly need an increase there.
Excuse me for a second. I'm
Oh,
sorry. I'm
so sure, Sue.
This is Susan. Blythe, I printed off what you sent, and I don't see a dollar amount next to some of these. Do you have that? Do you have that somewhere on a different slide? I mean, I just printed it in order, and in the public works section, I don't see that. Obviously, I can read this, but I just didn't know. And we see there's 4.1%, but is there, the way there was with police and fire, are there dollar amounts listed?
Yes, we do
Susan,
have
I
a
can-
dollar amount overall in the salaries on the next page, but we didn't dollarize these exactly the same way.
I have some numbers in front of me if you just kind of want to know off the top what we're looking for.
For example, when you say reinstate, and this is not a complaint, just make sure, I don't want it to come across as I'm complaining by any means, but when you say reinstate the superintendent position, what's the line item cost for that? Just things like that. They don't have to be specific and exact. I'm just trying to get an overall idea of what the 4.1 includes.
Yeah, not a problem. I can give you those. So the superintendent position is roughly, if we go out of department, it's going to be around $75,000. We're hoping that we can do everything internally, but we had a budget for the high end. If we do everything internally, there'll actually be a cost savings. So we'll save some money there. Engineering for the shovel.
Do you have to post it externally?
We have to post it internally first due to union regulations. But in case someone inside we have a candidate inside that we'd like to see get the position.
Right.
But in case that person decides not to, we have to go outside. So I had to aim high in order to cover.
No, of course. I just was saying I'd love to see it be someone promoted from within if possible.
We would too, because it would basically realize a great savings in our budget. So our overall budget would actually decrease if that was to come to fruition. Our shovel ready projects for engineering. So last year we added a line item in the highway budget for $20,000 for engineering services. That was anticipation of the amount of work that we had last year with paving everything. If we weren't able to cover it, we're going to bring in a consulting firm to help us out. So we didn't have to touch that. So we're proposing that we're going to move the $20,000 that was in the highway engineering to the administration engineering, which was an existing line item of $10,000. So that'll make the engineering budget $30,000. So it's really just a shift. It's a level funded shift. The idea behind that is
you know, there's a lot of grants out there for sidewalks and other things, but a precursor to it is we need to have projects ready to go. So we need a little spend a little money on our end. So then we're prepared to get a greater good of money on the other end. Hazardous tree removal, our existing budget was $35,000. We're looking to increase that to $45,000. The last couple of years, we were lucky we had Eversource helping us with our hazardous and dead tree removal. They were focusing on the areas of town that have a lot of power outages. They're going away. So our good fortune of having them is come to an end. So we kind of need to increase some money there so we can kind of take care of our dead and hazardous trees. The other part of that component to that too is we're actually contemplating the possibility of going out for an RFP to see if we can get some better competitive pricing on our dead and hazardous tree removal. Blair can address the leachate. This is a new one that has come to our attention, which is quite surprising.
So so as far as leachate goes, in 1992, the landfill was capped. Part of that process, from an engineering standpoint, was to have testing wells drilled around, and any of the water that is shed from the landfill itself goes to a containment basin, which has to be removed. The water that comes through there has to be removed. In the past, we have budgeted $30,000 for that, but we have found over the past year, for whatever reason, whether it's groundwater, whether it's from rain, whatever the reason, that has continued to skyrocket, and it's up about 40% this year over the past few months. So we're looking at the engineer that's been involved with this since 1992. We're in talks with him to look over the historical data to try to find the cause. But there is an inherent cost that we will continue to have to put forth in order to deal with that hazard. Beyond that, in the fall town meeting, we have gone after mandated stormwater costs, which we have moved into the budget, as opposed to going after in a separate fashion at fall town meeting. That is mandated to go forward. It's really just shifting it from fall to the spring. Barry can elaborate a little more on stormwater.
Yep,
And
absolutely. So for the last several years, we're under a DEP and EPA mandate to address our stormwater. So Blythe and I had originally decided that we were going to go to a fall town meeting for $50,000. So the town is committed $250,000. So it's $50,000 a year for 5 years. Looking at what's coming down the pipe, and it's going to be an ongoing maintenance issue and process issue to keep up with our stormwater. We thought it was a good idea to actually add it as a division to the town, to the DPW. So we basically wouldn't have to go through the appropriation of the $50,000 at every town meeting. It would be a standard line item in the DPW budget, so we can deal with EPA and DEP regulations coming down the pipe.
And last but not least, we have some money in the budget for street sign replacements. Street signs have to meet the MUTCD standard for street signs. Anybody that has followed over the selectmen's meetings over the past few months realizes there's been a discussion about the street signs that are in town, but it goes beyond that to stop signs and any variety of others, crosswalk signs, yield signs, and so on and so forth. The signs that we have in town, we have been trying to replace as needed, but they are certainly expensive. We will never be able to do them all in one shot, so we do pick and choose as the year goes by, but that will be an ongoing cost for years to come.
Can I ask a question? Can I ask a couple follow-up questions on that last slide?
Sure,
David.
go ahead, David.
Okay, so the first one is, I think you answered it, but the shade tree removal, is any of that done internally or is it a contracted expense?
It's all subcontracted.
Okay.
Hey, if you want to buy us a bucket truck and staff us. with
No,
Yeah.
I was worried about your employees, frankly.
Yeah, David,
So that's one of the reasons we've had the same sub-consultant for, I want to say 15 years. So that's one of the things we're looking at, possibly testing the waters and getting an RFP out there to get maybe a little bit more robust contract in town for us to help us out with the shade trees.
Okay. The second follow-up was on the leachate issue. Is this not considered a capital expense, or, I mean, will it ultimately possibly be a capital expense? Is this a breakdown in the system, or is this just, do we truck the leachate off-site, or?
Yeah, we hire a company to come in and pump the tank as needed.
Okay.
So that is an ongoing, and during times of the year, if it's a dry summer, it happens rarely. It could go even a couple of months, but it's certainly a meteorological tie to that.
But we had a significant drought for a significant portion of last year. So is there a capital issue? I mean, is there a functioning issue with the leachate system? I guess that's what I'm trying to get at. Is there?
And that's why we were talking to engineers. I'm not sure at this point. That's why I'm, it goes back, 30 years. So I'm trying to dig through historical data to see if it is a functioning problem or if it's just something that happens every so often.
And then the last question, and I think I'm going to need to understand this better. What does establishing a division mean in terms of the budget? I mean, is it extra bodies? I understand. I look at your budget and I see the various divisions, and some of them are obviously not big enough to even have one FTE in them. But how does this work in terms of protecting or sort of baking in the stormwater costs into the annual budget, I guess?
So this isn't there's nothing to do with staffing. It was more of a procedural thing. So instead of going to, fall town meeting and requesting the $50,000 that we were set to get, it sets it up as a line item within our department.
So what does that expense get spent on?
Right now, so we're in the process of there's a bunch of different components to addressing the stormwater. Step one was to locate and map our entire system, our infrastructure of stormwater, so catch basins, drain manholes, everything like that. So we're working on that. There was regulatory compliance that we had to readdress, bylaws. There's tons of reporting we have to do. There's training we have to do. And one of the things that we're facing is there's a maintenance cost to keeping up with our stormwater system, which hasn't been kept up with. So not only are we trying to use this $50,000 to meet our compliance that we have to do, we're planning for the future is, right now I have about 35 detention basins that haven't been maintained in 20 years. Those need to be mowed, maintained. So this is allowing us to reach our compliance measures that we have to, and also planning for the future to keep us ahead of anything that might come down the pipe.
You also have a storm scepter system behind my house that needs to be cleaned quarterly and hasn't been cleaned in 4 or 5 years. So
that is a huge problem. Trust me. Every time I go out and open up a manhole, I'm finding something I wish I didn't know. But
I can show you if you want to drive by. So
not a problem.
Right.
So
Thank you.
Want to weigh in for a second here. We thought it was important to put it in the budget because the first 5 years of 50,000 is just the beginning. As Barry alluded to, we're going to have an ongoing and increasing cost to maintain everything to the EPA mandate of our what's called our MS4 permit, and we're going to have some real conversations at a future point about how we pay for that, because it will become a burden on the general fund. Some communities have even established what's called stormwater utilities and assessed people, every property owner to pay for it. And that's, way too early to have that conversation here right now. But we felt the first important step was having it show up in the budget as a regular line item. So there's a place to start the conversation.
Thank you.
I also have just a quick question, or actually two. One being, I'm having a hard time following between this briefing and what's in the working copy of FY22 budget. I could follow some of the items, like for example, when he said the $20,000 was being moved out of highway, and I could see that 20,000 move out of the highway line. But when he said it went into engineering, I don't even see a division called engineering. So I'm having a hard time following between where your say things are to check the actual expenses.
Yeah, so in the highway budget, there was a line item for highway engineering. We moved that to the admin budget, where there was an engineering line item in the
Barry,
admin budget.
can I jump in for a second? So I think what Brian's asking is, after the meeting tonight, what we ought to do is forward the detail that you provided to Todd and I.
Yep.
And that will give Brian and the others the chance to look at the puts and takes, because that all gets then put into these, salary and expense line items, and you can't see that detail here. So I think that will be a helpful way, rather than explaining each one tonight. I think if you have a chance to look at that, you'll catch up. And I apologize, we didn't put it on slides to that level of detail.
Yeah, that's a good call, Blythe. I always forget that the DPW budget is a bit more detailed than the Munis budget. So they're looking at the overall, and I'm looking at the finite details.
And that's why I'm glad we started as the first presentations of your season, so that you could ask these questions. We can get you those details and get all the questions answered.
The second question I had, and thank you for getting to that detail as a follow-up. When it says a 4.1 overall budget increase, I assume that includes the major categories of public works, shared and fixed costs, and the transfer station all rolled together.
Correct.
Okay, I just want that clear, because when we flip slides and we said this was a 4% increase, and then we go to a slide that says a 10% reduction in the transfer station cost, that 10% reduction is baked into this 4% increase already, and it's not obvious from the slide presentation that that's double counting.
Okay.
I mean, you either break it out by division, or you put it all in one. This breaks out the negative part and then rolls the negative back into the overall number as well, and doesn't call out other.
Right, we didn't go, subtotal by subtotal. You're correct.
Okay, thanks.
So let's go over the salary section. Claire, please.
Sure. So in the salaries, obviously, as alluded to before, the union contract for both clerical and the DPW workers is yet to be negotiated. We certainly have an idea of where that may go, but certainly don't have a definite number for sure. As I alluded to in the last slide, we would like to reinstate an operational superintendent to streamline operations, and depending on whether or not that's an interior move or someone from an exterior position, we would certainly hope for the interior, but have budgeted for the exterior. Beyond that, we are continued, and last year we did this, and we're going to do this again this year, and realign some internal labor positions to support other departments. This year, we tried a new alignment with recreation to make sure that the fields get the attention that they needed to get on more of a dedicated standard, and we're going to capitalize on that experience and make a couple more moves within the DPW to further that. So that will most likely involve a realignment of a labor position there, most likely from another department, another division, and we'll move forward there. Public Works expense, transfer station, as many of you know, last year we used to have a sticker system where Residents, members of the transfer station bought stickers, put them on bags, but we found that we didn't believe that to be very efficient. So we did switch last summer to a bag pay-as-you-throw system, which we believe has been much more efficient in accounting for our costs in getting rid of waste and recycling. So that's a lot of where the savings have come from over the past year. I think there's still a few more areas there where we can do better, but we're certainly headed in the right direction. As Barry alluded to earlier, the creation of stormwater division with the DPW is certainly an expense there, as well as trying to put out an RFP to deal with shade trees that are diseased and dying. And as alluded to in the first page, to try to get some engineering projects, sidewalks and roadways and whatnot to have some shovel-ready projects so that we are available to get as much grant money as possible. So that's the bulk of where our expenses come from going forward.
I have a question on the revenue side of that. You talk about the switch over from stickers to bags, increased revenue associated with the transfer station. Looking at the revenue budget that was submitted, though, it looks like FY20 transfer station revenue was 325, and then for 21 and 22, it's projected at 250. Is that the sale of goods out of the transfer station, or is that the revenue associated with the stickers / bags? Like, I'm trying to reconcile the revenue going down and you saying it's more efficient. And
so we lowered the revenue projection in FY21 to $250,000 because we knew we were never making the 325. We weren't close. At the beginning of FY21, we did switch from stickers to bags, and we increased the amount of the annual sticker, the permit, if you will. We've been tracking that this year, and it looks like it's moving up, but we're not ready to say that we can increase that revenue line from 250 to higher. We're really waiting to see what a full year of operation looks like. I'm very anxious to see the third quarter report we should get in a couple of weeks. And then the fourth quarter is also really important because that's when we sell the annual permits. And so we won't really have a good picture until the year is really closed. So again, we're trying to be conservative and not assume a revenue increase that we might possibly not be able to sustain.
Yeah, Brian, and a lot of the solid waste deductions, we had basically a shift in inside positions. So we had a new foreman who was making less than the former foreman. As we did with the last year's budget, we actually took a little bit of more of a fine-tuned look at the solid waste budget, and we were able to reduce several line items to bring that overall budget down that 10.3%. So yeah, we're relying on the great efforts that we've done to bring in more money, but everything we looked at internal was just more fine-tuning that overall budget.
okay, so the difference is more on the cost control than it is increased revenue at this point.
Right now we're not able. I mean, I can't wait. I'm the same as everybody else. We want to be able to see where we're at. Everything we're looking at is trending better than it was. But we're not going to know until we get all the final revenues in.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask a quick follow-up on Brian's questions? I'm sort of a trash and recycling geek. I have some background in that area. I'd be curious on those quarterly reports because I know I'd actually be interested in the ones towards the end of last year too, because we didn't do recycling for a few weeks there. For instance, we just did trash. So I'm just really interested in the tonnage because I think you're right that you're going to find a lot more people were paying. The tonnage probably doesn't change, but more people are paying for bags than we're paying for stickers. So I don't know. I'd be really interested in some of that real detail. So
I agree with you, David. I think what it did is the pound, the tonnage that we were actually having to truck out became accountable at that point. We were actually getting paid for that amount. And I think COVID is going to have an effect on these numbers as well. So it's, until we have a full year.
Tonnage is going to be up too, because more people are eating three squares a day at home. So
correct. And we see that with the amount of takeout containers and the plastic recycling. So there's certainly been a difference over the past year. So it's foolhardy, I think, to not get a full year under our belt before we try to make at least some educated assumptions.
Thank you.
We'll send you the second quarter report and the third quarter report when it comes out.
Cool. Thanks.
Thank you, David.
This is Kristen. My first thought was that from Brian's question, we've talked about how to present the budget in the past at town meeting. And so this is more of like an overarching comment, I guess, but there are definitely times where it's better to look at the actual spending or actual revenue versus the budget, right? So that was an example of where someone's going to ask at town meeting, why did we go from 325 to 250? And if we had ready to go at town meeting, the actuals, that can stem some of those questions. So just one comment there. My question is from a few slides ago, which is, can someone clarify for me why it would cost more to bring in an outside superintendent versus someone from internal?
The internal, Kristen, the internal job would be, because that money's already allocated to an existing employee. So there would be a promotion per se, but that number, their job, for all intents and purposes, would encompass a job that's already there with added duties. So
okay, so we wouldn't rehire for that position. We would just
correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Thank you very much.
And we would prefer to do that if at all possible.
Okay.
You would not need to replace the person that got the promotion. You could operate with that person doing both jobs.
I believe so, yes.
Okay, that's actually a good thing to know.
I think over time, I would like people to be aware, though, that as recreation is an awesome program, and they've got plans for growth for the future, and use of the fields, outside of COVID, it's going to continues to be very high. We struggle at sometimes to keep up with all of that work in that type of season, and so while I'm not proposing a new position in DPW this year, I will tell you that's probably something we'll look at in the future to make sure that we're able to meet the level of service expectations that people have in this and in some other areas.
I think it's been helpful, Blythe, to see you all provide the FTE counts and some of the documentation you're giving us, because I think that's helpful in framing, that exact same question, right? So if we promote someone and we don't replace them, and then next year we want to hire for that, it's a better narrative. It helps, support the narrative.
Exactly. Thank you. Any other questions for Blair and Barry? Susan, are we ready to move on?
Yes, I think so.
Okay. So I just wanted to, I think it's important to show you some other budget drivers and things that we just think you should be aware of.
Excuse me, sorry, Blythe.
Oh, sure.
I don't think that we need it necessarily for the overall approval of the budget, but just to put this in your, in your ear. I think that you're going to need, even if you don't show them, you're going to need the line items for DPW on hand for town meeting, just
of course,
in case anyone has questions or whatever. We're used to doing this and we're okay with just a verbal explanation, but I think that town meeting's going to want to see the line items straight across the board.
Of course, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
You also mentioned talking about using potentially free cash for additional road repair. Is that above what's budgeted, or would that be within the amount that was in there in highways?
So the money that's in the DPW budget is just for minor repairs, potholes and things like that. I mean,
it'd be the capital expense.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So other areas of the budget, not related to the three major departments, I just wanted to give you some awareness of. One of the biggest cost increases in our budget this next year on the town side is Norfolk County Retirement. That $165,000 is about just over 7% increase, and that's a straight assessment from the county. On a percentage basis, the biggest increase in any of the departments throughout the whole budget is in information technology. That's really due to two items. As you know from the fall town meeting, we made an arrangement to share a IT technician with the town of Millis. We're in the hiring process right now for 15 hours a week. That's our share. We had budgeted 25 in the fall, and our full year cost we're estimating to be 50,000. So that's an increase, part of this increase you see on the screen. And the other is that Gmail, which we use for our email service for all of our user accounts, is going up. They're significantly increasing their pricing, and if we sign on to the early option in, the increase is $12,000 a year for all the accounts that we have. I think I'm going to say around 102 on the town side. And then there's some small increases for continuing to pay for Zoom accounts, which we never had until the pandemic, and some work to make sure we're training everybody and avoiding cybersecurity issues that some of our neighbors have had problems with. As I mentioned at the beginning of the whole presentation, we're budgeting for employee COLAs for the two unions and the non-union employees. That's 38,000 what we've got planned in the budget. And transparency subscription 13. We've had two reductions in the budget next year. Non-exempt debt, that's inside the levy debt, is planned to be reduced to 35,000 based on what's come and gone off of our debt schedule in the last year. And then we have less elections in FY22, so that's a decrease of just over 10,000. And some good news, which is helping our budget a lot on the health insurance area. We, partly because of the pandemic and partly because we just seem to have low usage by employees who have health insurance, our increase in health insurance is a minus 0.6% next year, which we're pretty excited about. And besides that, our Blue Cross, who we have for through Maya, your local insurance association, their bottom line has done very well as they're not paying out claims. And so they're offering all of their accounts the ability to have a half-month rate holiday, and again, in FY22. So there's a savings baked in for that as well. So I'll just share a little good news when it comes along. And so then there are some things that we're still working on. This budget is not completely balanced yet. We're out of balance by just under 100,000. And the things that you should be aware of include the fact that while we are including the full amount of the Norfolk school budget and KP and the others, Norfolk Schools' budget would mean that there would be three positions that are people who don't work for us now and would potentially have health insurance through the town. And that is an expense we've got to continue to talk with them about because it affects that overall line item. When I wrote this presentation, KP hadn't certified its budget, but I understand that they did last night at what was presented. So that's just over a 2% increase overall for Norfolk next year. We're the lowest of the three towns. Rentham is about 4.5%, and Plainville is about a 10% increase based on the Chapter 70 formula. Always a question, what's the state, House and Senate versions of the budget going to be? Is it going to be the same as the governor's budget, more, less? How's that all going to work out? And then lastly, and I brought this up with the select board last night, do we want to budget prison mitigation free cash, i.e. do we want to raise our expenses, spend more money and count those revenues, or not count them and be able to address other factors of our overall picture in the fall? So we try to keep this really high level at this point, and happy to take any other questions that you have or make some notes about other information you'd like to have us bring back to you.
Blythe, this is Kristen. I had a question about the Board of Health. Is that a fair question to ask at this point?
Excellent question.
So I noticed that there was no change in their budget. Given what we've learned over the last year, is there an idea that we should increase the budget from anyone?
Your question is absolutely perfect timing, because one of the state just 2 weeks ago announced a grant program to encourage, motivate communities to either expand or establish regional health districts to improve overall the approach to public health in the state. And that those grants they're planning to give out $300,000 grants and $300,000 per year for 3 years to motivate that to happen. So I had a meeting today with Rentham, and we are working to try to team up with Franklin as well. We already have a relationship with them in the MEC and other things that we've done together. They have the staff that we don't have. I mean, you could tell by our budget, we don't have staff. We contract out everything except for sharing a shared administrative position in Betsy Fidgel with planning.
God love Betsy. She was getting so many emails these last 6 months.
Yeah.
So that's what I was thinking about in terms of any more resources we could provide there.
Sure. So, my preference, and Rich McCarthy and I are gonna spend some time with the Board of Health next Tuesday talking about it. Select Board did last night, is that we all know we need to do a much better job, but we'd like to do it as cost effectively as possible. And Rentham already has 2 public health nurses on staff. Franklin has a public health director and a health agent. And so the bones of a district that we can put together with a significant grant, I think can mean that we can vastly improve what we do and address the things that we don't do at all right now. What you don't see in our Board of Health budget, because it's in a 53G account or a revolving account, is what is taken in by people who need to have a septic system put in and inspected. They pay for those things, and then that money gets paid out to the consultant that we hire. The same thing happens with food inspections and those sorts of things. So we do spend more than this. It's just not apparent because it's not in the general fund. But all that would go towards working together and figuring out the right staffing to meet what the state's looking for is a kind of a basic level of service in public health for the future.
Great. Thank you, Blythe. I
Sorry
wasn't even planted.
So what I would say is that I'm not sure we won't need to budget more at some point. I said to Rentham, I said, well, we need to decide soon if I need to put a little bit more in my budget, or we'll have to wait till the fall. Hopefully the state grant can get us through the beginning of it and we can figure that out.
Great, thank you.
Blythe, can I ask a question about the contract and contracts? And I'm sorry if I missed this and you've talked about it twice now. When are they up and when are you anticipating having the negotiations finalized?
So both the DPW union and the clerical union contract are up on June 30th of this year.
I think I knew that part, but are you planning on having...
if it was only up to me, I would have started already and have this pretty well done, but the union wants to start in the next couple of weeks. We have had meetings with the select board to talk about parameters, and we've got our ground rules and our proposals ready to go.
So you would anticipate having these numbers be real before town meeting?
I've never negotiated with these groups, so I don't know if it's going to go very quickly or a little slowly.
Okay.
But we have made plans in the budget for what we think a fair settlement would be.
Thank you.
All right, do we have any further questions? Blythe, did you want to go over the historical budget spreadsheet, or are you all wrapped up?
I'm happy to go into the detail, and Todd can as well, in the overall, the actual budget documents, what you've typically seen throughout the various meetings we've had finalized. Any other questions you have about any of that, we'd be happy to answer. I'm going to take this off the screen. And just while we're waiting, I did hear through text that I was reminded that NCTV can't stream 2 meetings at one time. So for whatever, so Amy, to your question, they for some reason focused on streaming the ZBA meeting, and that means they couldn't stream ours.
Yeah, I did see that email after we started talking.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions specifically relating to for any of the departments that presented, or for Blythe specifically on the budget? No? Okay. As far as this goes, there was sort of a snafu with posting the agenda for this evening on the website. So all of the website said was that we were discussing the town warrant versus voting. So unless anyone has an objection, I'd like to wait to vote on this. This pertains to Article 5. I'd like to wait to do that until another week, unless there's further, we can obviously have the discussion this evening and we can vote. I'd like your input on whether you think that's prudent to vote if we did not post it to the agenda, that we would be voting on the town budget this evening.
So Susan, the budget's not finalized. I don't think you'd want to take a vote up tonight.
Okay. Does anyone have anything else they'd like to discuss pertaining to this while we have everyone here? Seeing as though we'll probably only have Todd and Blythe when they come back to present the final budget to us. No? Okay. So moving on, Blythe is responsible for presenting to us and answering questions roughly on Articles 2 through, excuse me for a second, I believe it's 2 through 13. A lot of them are general housekeeping that we probably don't need to discuss. You know, the normal transfers and wastewater and things like that. I do not want to vote on any of them, but I would like to go through them and just briefly give a quick explanation from Blythe on each of them. That way, if there are questions, we can answer them while everyone is on this call, because next week we have the B1 and the zoning stuff, which is probably going to be a fairly long meeting and is only going to relate to B1 and zoning. And then the week after that, we have both of the school budget presentations. And then the week after that is when we're going to come back together, regroup with some of the smaller warrant articles, like the well, not that they're smaller, but you know what I mean, the non-town ones, which are like CPC and animal regulations. I've got most everybody scheduled and lined up for those 2 weeks, which is April 7th and April 14th, but that will also be the 2 meetings where we would vote. We can vote next week on the zoning articles as long as I post that to the agenda ahead of time. And we can also, you know, we don't vote on the school budgets, but they're part of the overall budget. But so I don't have a problem doing that. But I would like to go through these, if Blythe, if that's okay with you, just quickly run down the list so that when we come back together to vote on them in a couple of weeks, we don't have to spend a lot of time answering specific questions about them. Obviously, unless new questions arise. If that works for everyone? Yes?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So obviously Article 1, I'm reserving, not that it's part of what she's coming for, but Carol Green is coming in a couple of weeks to do the animal regulations. So I figured if there were any questions on Article 1, since that was from her, we would just handle it then. So if you want to start with Article 2 and then just obviously the ones that are housekeeping, you can just skip over.
Right, so Article 2 is, we always have on the warrant just in case there's an unpaid bill, but there weren't any in November, and I'm not aware there are any now. And Todd agrees. Article 3 is transfers. We haven't actually started putting that list together yet, except I know it's gonna have snow and ice and probably some other items. That's probably the one, if anything, you're gonna wanna wait till town meeting because those things come together pretty much near the end, but we'll keep you apprised of how that's shaping up. Article 4 is the article by which the non-union pay plan, it can be adjusted by a COLA. Last year, because of the pandemic, there was no COLA for non-union employees. We've scripted it for now as what we would typically provide, which would be 1.5%, but I would tell you that we're still working on that. I'm going to keep going, but please feel free to jump in and interrupt if something someone wants to ask. I don't want to skip over anyone's questions. Article 5 is the budget.
Sorry, real quick. When you say still working, remind me of what still working on it means.
What working on means that we are in negotiations with the other 2 unions. I know that the school is still working on its side, and you know, it's always a balance. We want to be fair and equitable to our employees and fair and equitable to our taxpayers. And I want to make sure that we try to treat people, you know, all of our employees equally when we're all said and done. So I'm just not sure exactly where we're settling here yet.
To have parity with the.
Yep, parity is important. Article 6 is the Water Enterprise Fund budget. This is what we are planning right now for that next year. It's actually, I believe it, Todd, isn't it a decrease from FY21? I can't see your Hollywood square, so yell it out for me if you remember off the top of your head. Oh, he's on mute, but I believe it is a decrease because we had added money in the FY21 budget to finish off Holbrook Street well, so this is a little lower. And then the Article 7 is the Wastewater Enterprise Fund budget. This one looks to be a little bit higher than last year by about $20,000. As you know, this is money that is not paid by the taxpayers. It comes directly from the users. We have been on a odyssey journey, Todd and I, to sort out how that agreement works and how the users pay us for that. I won't torture you with knowing all about that. But in that, we've realized that we had the ability to charge some fees we hadn't been charging. And so this is set up a little bit differently than you've seen it before, in that we're going to charge the users a portion, use retained earnings that we have for a portion. The overall experience to the user is going to be pretty much equal to what they paid in FY21. Article 8 is capital, which we're not planning to spend any funds on, and we don't typically do that in the spring, but as you know, we always have it on here in case there's a reason that we do need to address something. It's not on the warrant, we can't. So that's why it is carried. And the same answer for Article 9. This is capital that we would use debt to pay for or another vehicle. And again, we're not planning to do any this spring. Article 10 is the reports of committees. Is the advisory committees typically doesn't vote on that, take a position, and at this point, I'm not aware who wants to make a presentation to town meeting. Article 11 is the reapproval of all of the expenditure limits for the revolving funds. They're all the same this year, except for the Council on Aging Fund, which is proposed to go from 6,000 to 47,000. And we're really pleased for about the reason for this, which is, as you know, we have an assessment on the cherry sheet to pay for part of GATRA's transportation services. They've changed up their program and they are willing to, they're going to be providing us with a handicap accessible bus out of what we pay for a portion of that service that will be managed by the COA. And so they are going to give us the funds. They're going to give us the bus, and then they're going to also give us the funds to hire a driver to drive the bus, and for some of the staff costs to coordinate that program. So no out-of-pocket extra costs for residents, taxpayers, but improved service for people who need to get around. As you know, the bus that the town owns is not handicap accessible, which has been limiting for their programs if you can't transport people who need some extra help. So,
Blythe, it looks like,
Sure.
sorry, it looks like Article 19 and Article 20 are part of the Council on Aging, which is Cindy, I believe. And I think she's going to come on the 14th. So unless you'd like to answer questions on that, we can.
I can give you a very quickie on both of those.
Okay.
Or if you'd like, yep.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we can go ahead and address, when you're done, if you want to address 19 and 20, and then if the board has questions, I'll have Cindy come like we planned on the 14th. But if there are no questions, there's no reason for Cindy to come and, be here.
So I actually, beg your indulgence perhaps to talk about Article 20 because Andy Bakanowski is here, the chair of the Energy Committee.
Okay.
I'm sure he wants to weigh in. So very quickly, it was suggested to us by a resident that we consider the town offering a municipal electricity aggregation program. And what that is in a nutshell is that the state has deregulated the purchase of electricity, and communities can, on behalf of their residents and businesses, basically go out to bid on their own or with other communities to try and find a more competitive price for electricity than they can paying it straight to the utility company. If you've ever studied your Eversource bill, it's really in two components. One component is the transmission and distribution of the power to get it from wherever it comes from to your house. And the other part is the actual cost of the power. So what we're talking about is the actual cost of the power. And so it's a program where we can, by town meeting can agree to let us set up a program. And we would go out and then retain a consultant who would put together a plan that would go to the Department of Public Utilities to be approved, after which we'd go out to bid, probably with a large group, look to get a competitive price lower than what Eversource charges, and then offer our residents and businesses the opportunity to participate in that program or not if they don't want to. And the whole goal is to save a little bit of money, and I'm not going to overstate it. It's not a lot of money, but some money on what they're buying anyway. I can tell you, I participate where I live in Westboro. I think I saved $13 last month. And will I every month of the year? It's not guaranteed, but simply a way that we can help people with a bill they're going to pay anyway if they choose. It's the cost of the consultant is paid through the overall contract with the utility that it gets bought from. The bill a resident or business will continue to get comes from Eversource, looks like their regular bill. But if you turn it over and look and see who's supplying it, the company that gets chosen is the one whose name shows up in the rate that's been agreed to by the town. One of the other things that people really like about them is you can usually offer a couple of different options. So if you want the cheapest power or that you can get, there's a rate for that. If you're interested in supporting renewables, there can be a portion that's that, or there can be an option that's as green as possible for people who really feel passionately about that and are willing to spend a little more for it. So that's a very quick overview. We can get you a whole presentation. The Energy heard about it. But I'm curious if Andy, if you'd like to jump in, because I'm sure I left something important out.
Can everybody hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. But I mean, you've pretty much covered everything. There are various companies that are out there, and to emphasize, as Blythe said, we don't want to oversell this. I mean, realistically, the two presentations and information that I've received, as well as our last Energy Committee, the presentation that was made, you're going to be saving around 1.2 cents per kilowatt hour based on the last year. This actually would probably go into effect in calendar year 2022, just because the time and the approval of the application by the DPU. So this is the time frame. But the Energy Committee as a whole views this as something positive for residents to take advantage of. It may not be for everyone, and I think it is critical. And I'll hammer on this point again: is that it's not a huge savings, but if you take some care, look at the program, there will be some savings, and this day and age, it's definitely a benefit. And again, if you want to pursue supporting renewable energy, that option is there too. So the one or two things that we were concerned about, I personally was concerned about, and a few other members were concerned about too, is termination fees. Because if you've lived in town long enough, when Constellation New Energy and Duke Energy and Blue Wave Energy, when they were sending them out, when you'd cancel the subscription to them, you'd be getting hit with a several $100 cancellation fee, and that was in the fine print somewhere, but people were upset about that. That's one thing that this program does not have, where there would be no cancellation fee. So if you're not happy with it, you can go back to Eversource providing both the electricity as well as the transmission and distribution charges. So I think it's definitely something positive for the town. So we support it, and I think it's pretty straightforward. I expect a lot of questions to be come up once the program gets initiated, but I think we'll have to put some sort of cheat sheet or some sort of list of possible things that people should consider looking at before they make the final decision. But there is some legwork, and we'll address those when they come. But I think the first step is getting the program approved at the townwide level.
One quick question: how does it affect people who have solar panels?
If you have solar panels on your house now, if your system is creating more power than you're using and you're exporting power out, you're not going to see any benefit at all to this program. If your solar system is contributing to 50% of your daily use or your annual use, that 50% that's remaining that you're actually purchasing from Eversource, that would be affected by this program. So realize too is that a couple of the companies that I know of that do offer these programs, you very well could be paying or getting paid your RECs if you own the system, or the RECs that are being generated by your system, the green credits. You could be basically paying for those RECs by supporting solar. So you have to be diligent in understanding how that's there. But also, if you have I don't know if you have a monthly supplier or a monthly fee associated with the lease of a panel system on your house, talk with the supplier, or talk with the installer, and see what they have and how they deal with that. I have the sneaking suspicion that probably 50% of them would sort of come back with a bunch of questions, and the others would probably say, well, whatever you purchase off the grid, that would be affected by the different rate. So.
I imagine that town town folks have all different configurations of this, and we'll probably have questions about how it works.
Yeah, I mean, it's as simple, and I'm not going to put Dave on the spot, but I think, Dave would say, the simplest way is if you own the system, that's probably going to be the easiest way, and that the difference between what your system generates and what you purchase off from Eversource, that's pretty straightforward. But again, it depends upon what the power purchase agreement is that you have with the supplier. But that may take a little more time and effort than some people want to do, so they may just sort of leave with the way things are. So,
thanks, Andy. I would like to see some of the more full presentations on this, and I'd also like to have an opportunity to talk to folks. I work in one of the offices that works with the municipalities that do this stuff, so I want to check around with them. It's not what I'm heavily involved in, but or involved at all, actually. But I'd like to ask some questions both before and after we see a presentation. So
Yeah, so we have a
presentation. We one of the vendor that gave us the presentation to the Energy Committee a few weeks ago said they'd be willing to come to town meeting, and we'll have to.
I want to see it before then.
Okay.
Yeah, we have a copy of the presentation they gave to the Energy Committee, and we can definitely pass that along. And I would say, please understand, we're not at all wedded to them. We would go through a process.
No, I understand. Yeah, I actually looked at this in one of my other jobs for the city I worked on, and we decided not to do it. And that's one of the people I want to talk to is
Andy.
Yep.
Andy, we have room in the schedule on April 7th and April 14th. If either of those dates work for you to come back and give us a short presentation and answer some questions.
We can shoot for the 14th, if that's okay.
Yep. I think I have your email from a thread that I would have with Blythe earlier, so I will send you an email confirmation and I'll add you to the agenda for April 14th.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Okay, no problem. And again, I think if Blythe, I know you said there was nobody that had talked about any committee updates, but whether you want to have the Energy Committee talk about this sort of in a brief as a prelude to the warrant article coming up, but the Energy Committee definitely would like to make a presentation on the green communities funding that we received and the work that's been done and the projected savings for the budget. So
sure, I'll pass that on to Jay.
Yep. So okay.
All right. So I believe that's the bulk of the town warrants. That oh, sorry.
I have a follow-up question on the article relative to the revolving funds that we were on before we moved off this. Blythe, just so I understand it, the increase, the $47,000 increase includes all but 6,000 of that, whatever, is from GATRA?
Yes.
And it needs to go into a retained revenue account?
No, the amount that's on those revolving accounts is the spending limitation on an annual basis. So we have to vote in a spending limitation for that.
No, I understand, but it's
based on what GATRA is going to provide to us. Our expenses should not exceed the differential between the 6,000 and the 47.
Okay. I just thought, it seems like a completely different revenue source than most of the other revolving funds, if not all the other revolving funds, which have to do with fees charged and revenues generated through the sale of things and stuff like this.
Correct.
This is a contract, isn't it? Is it a contract?
This is the Council of Aging's revolving account for their programs.
Okay.
GATRA is going to be one of the programs that's available through it.
We haven't crossed the bridge about whether or not we're going to charge, a small amount for the rides. We still have to work out that detail, but we at least wanted to have the capacity to start the program by being able to spend the money because the expense limit had been increased.
All right.
And Susan, I'll just touch on Article 19 for a second, just so you have an idea of that. So this would allow us to accept a section of the state law that would enable us to set up an elderly and disabled taxation fund. It's in essence another tool in the toolbox to assist folks who fall into that category with some financial assistance. It's a completely voluntary program by which the town would be required to set up a committee of 5 people, the chair of the board of assessors, the treasurer, and 3 citizens. And they would be able to put a line item on the tax bill and offer residents, whoever felt like it, the opportunity, if you call it that, to make a donation of any amount they choose to help people who fall into this category with expenses to stay in town. The committee then decides how those funds are spent and who the monies would go to. They are very popular in some communities and active, and aren't active at all in others who've tried it. But it does give us another option to help people who might otherwise be struggling, staying in the community, who fall into those categories. So that's really what it's all about. And the assessors and the treasurer office are on board with supporting it if it was passed.
Blythe, this reminds me, was there something similar we put in place for housing a year or 2 ago?
We did agree to allow CPC to spend some funds to help people who were in affordable housing with rental assistance.
Okay.
Because of the pandemic, along the same lines, but different. And being on the Affordable Housing Trust, I can tell you, I think we really only helped a couple of people. I don't remember exactly, but I think it was quite limited. This would be an ongoing program that, like I said, only would spend whatever people chose to donate to then turn around and help people.
Okay, thank you.
So that's all. I don't really have more to tell you about it than that at the moment.
Does everyone feel comfortable with sort of the general town articles, which is, like I said, it's 2 through 12?
Yeah.
Yeah. Just because I want to make sure that when it's time to vote, we don't have any outstanding questions. We can certainly ask questions, but I wanted, if we are going to have them, I'd like Blythe and Todd to be able to answer them when we come back. Just the way the schedule is structured for this spring, it's 3 weeks of presentations and then 2 meetings where we not only have some speakers coming to be available to answer questions and do smaller sort of presentations, but also those are our 2 meetings to do all of our voting. And a lot of times when we go to vote, sometimes we have further questions. So I just want to make sure that if that's going to be the case, I want to be prepared to have the right people here on those 2 nights to make sure that any question can be answered. People like Ingrid and Paul, and I'm assuming Chief Stone and those types of people will likely not come back. But obviously Blythe would be on hand, and whoever is coming on those evenings would be there. So if at any point there are questions that you guys have when you're looking over the warrant, if you can email me and let me know so that I can make sure that we're able to answer questions on the 14th and on the 7th of April, because we have about a 2 to 3 day turnaround. If we get the bulk of voting done on the 14th and on the 21st, all we have to do is assign warrant articles. You have 2 days to write them. If we get all of the voting done on the 14th and can assign warrant articles, you have a week and a half to write them. So I would love to have everything voted on and settled and all housekeeping issues done by the 14th to give you more time. But just know that if we don't have time to vote on everything, obviously not the transfers that have to be voted day of town meeting, but if we don't have time to vote on everything, you have a very short window to write your recommendations. Obviously they're kind of easy to do, so that shouldn't be a problem, but I just want everybody to be aware that starting a week later, we put us in a position to be going right up until the deadline.
So it makes it fun.
Yeah.
Susan, are we gonna be are we voting on the citizen petitions? And if so, when are we talking about those?
We are voting on this. There's only one citizen petition. There was originally two. Technically, there's still one in this draft warrant that's printed that Blythe gave us. There is a second citizens petition that is actually Article 31, which I noticed
I
tonight.
see two. I see Fruit Street, Article
Fruit
29.
Street one that doesn't have anything written on it.
And then Article 30, which is, so I do still see two on the draft warrant.
Okay, thank you. The one for Fruit Street is being pulled.
Okay.
So I don't know if it's in time to pull it from the warrant. Blythe can answer that, but it's definitely, we're not voting on it. It's the other article, the one that's by Peter Diamond, I believe is his name, and he is set to come, and I don't have my agenda right in front of me. I just brought the warrant with me, but it's either the 7th or the 14th.
Okay.
Everyone else that's not the school and is not zoning is coming on the 7th or the 14th.
Great.
I have CPC coming. And again, if we don't have questions for them, they can leave. I just wanted them here if that was the case. And the citizens petition is coming. I believe Cindy from the Council on Aging is going to be here. Now Andy is going to be able to come back, as well as Hillary Cohen and Carol Green for the animal regulations. And I'm sure there's something I'm forgetting, but I do have everyone set. So everything, all business will be done by the 14th, and it'll just be a matter of whether or not we get all the voting done that night.
Thank you.
I hadn't included the Fruit Street petition because it really wasn't in a format that the town meeting could act on. And they had submitted as a placeholder. We've talked back and forth, and they've let me know they're planning to sign a petition to officially withdraw it. I'm just waiting for the signatures. So,
and the other thing is that, and this pertains to next week, but since we're here, I wanted to just make sure everyone is aware. The zoning articles and the B1 articles that I'm referring to, those are separate things, although Rich McCarthy will be able to speak on all of them. The B1 articles, it's listed as one right now. They are sectioning them out. So when we get to town meeting, this is going to be well over 30 articles that we have to present. So a lot of them are the same. A lot of them are housekeeping, but that is a lot of articles to present. So, and I'm afraid that based on how the B1 presentation went the last time they came before advisory board, I can imagine it's going to be a very long and tedious meeting. So I just need, if we end early, that's fantastic. But that's the only reason why I only put zoning on for next week and didn't try to fit anyone else in, because I believe last time we had zoning here for the B1, which was almost 2 years ago, it was a 3.5 hour meeting. Now, a lot of these questions have been answered and a lot of our concerns were fixed this time. But as with all zoning, it's a process. And so just plan that next week's meeting could go longer than normal.
Can I ask a quick question, Susan?
Yes, of course.
When we talked about this a couple years ago or a year and whatever it was, when we were still meeting in person, didn't we have a discussion with them about why they were doing it all individually?
Yes.
And doesn't it make sense to try to clump some of these things if they're going to fall apart if they're voted on individually?
And that is what they are doing. But the problem is that a few, I know that some of the newer people don't know this, but I actually was the liaison for the B1 for the last 2 years. So unfortunately, I have all of this knowledge in my head. The problem is that they are technically still trying to get it together as one article. Not my personal preference. I think each thing should be voted on individually, because when one thing fails, then the whole thing fails. But again, I don't make the decisions for the B1 committee. But the problem is that legally, there are some zoning articles that only needed 50% approval at town meeting and some needed 2/3. So they are separating out the ones that need 2/3 from the ones that need 50. So at a minimum, we're going to have at least 2 of the B1 articles based on how they're going to vote on their meeting before they come. And I believe they meet Tuesday night, which is the night before they come. So we don't have a ton of, we do have a presentation. He has already sent me the link and I was sending it out to you guys tonight. So you can watch the full presentation at your leisure. He's going to do a short 10 to 15 minute presentation just to touch on the high points and to recap whatever they discuss in their planning board meeting on Tuesday. But the full presentation you would need to watch at home prior to the meeting. So hopefully you can, put it on and listen to it while you're cooking dinner or whatever you're doing and absorb it that way, because we really need to make sure we don't have an hour-long presentation followed by a 3-hour-long question and answer session. So that's why I set it up that way. So at a minimum, they're going to be presenting at least 2 articles at town meeting, and there's a chance they could be presenting more. So it just depends on how they end up sectioning it out. Let's see. And I did have a couple of little housekeeping things I wanted to go over with you guys, seeing as though I'm new. I just wanted to be clear on this. I am very, very new to this process. Obviously, I've been on the board for years, but I've never been the chair. I'm going to make mistakes. I'm not going to do things by law, and I am certainly open to critiquing and correcting. And you should always reach out to me and let me know that I'm doing something incorrectly. I don't get offended at all, but I also want to make it clear that we're all adults here. I don't think we have to raise our hand. We've been operating as a functional board for a long time now, and we seem to all get along and debate and discuss things back and forth. So I want everyone to do that. I don't think we need to wait our turn and raise our hand and things like that. But I also do not want anyone being disrespectful or talking over or dismissing anyone. And if anyone on the board ever feels that they're being dismissed or spoken over or not taken seriously, please reach out to me privately or just interrupt the meeting and say, excuse me, I was talking and I don't feel I'm being heard. I've served on a lot of boards, and there are times that I have felt that way. Sometimes I speak up and say, excuse me, I was talking. And other times I say, my turn. And other times I don't say anything. So, but I want everyone to know that they should feel comfortable enough to say that and not worry about whether or not I would be offended, because I'm not going to be offended. Again, I'm going to make mistakes, and just let me know that I've made a mistake and we'll move on and I'll address it in the moment. And I think that's it. I don't think I had anything else for this evening. If anybody has any questions about the agenda, I'm going to send out a revised one this evening, as well as hopefully work with Amy tomorrow on getting the updates posted on the website.
That will not be tomorrow, Susan.
I'd like to,
it will be updated by the weekend.
Okay. I'd like to post the links as well. I have a link from Ingrid, which is not for 2 more weeks, but I have a link from Ingrid on her school committee presentation, which we all agreed we would watch in advance as well, so that we didn't have to listen to the 2-hour-long presentations in the same night. And Paul Zinni is supposed to be sending me that as well, but I believe they just finalized it last night, so I'm assuming it's going to take a little time. So those links will also be posted on the website, as well as a little bit more of a detailed agenda. And I will also send them to you in an email. And I think that's it. Kevin or Blythe, can you think of anything that I'm forgetting? That we've had so many conversations. I want to make sure I'm remembering everything.
Sounds good to me, Susan. Can't hear you, Miss.
We can't hear you, Kevin.
Double muted. I'm sorry. I just said nothing more to add. Great job with your inaugural meeting.
Thank you. One last thing, in case anyone wasn't aware, I know there was only a few people who were on the email thread, but Amy Sheehan, our advisory assistant, has resigned. She's going to be with us tonight as well as next Wednesday. But after that, unless we can hire someone in the next 2 weeks, we will be on our own. if we do not have someone in the next couple of weeks and we do not have someone, I know there's been some ideas of having one of the senior interns or something like that come in. I will need someone to take notes either in the meeting or go back and watch the recording and record the minutes for this if we don't have an assistant by then, and then work with David on getting that situated. Obviously we want you paying attention to the presentations and we want you participating. So it might be easier to watch it afterwards and do it, but
You can't.
hopefully I'll have someone.
You can't do it in meeting season, Susan. I had to do it a couple times and I couldn't.
Right.
I got no content from that meeting because it was all,
Right.
you know, written down.
Yeah, that's what yeah, hopefully. So I'll get, if we can get someone, that's great. But if not, I'm going to be soliciting a volunteer to go back, rewatch the meeting and get some minutes from it, and then work with David. And then David as well, as far as putting it on the agenda, I just need you to let me know if you ever need minutes accepted at a meeting so that I can add that to the agenda.
I think it was on this meeting and I have minutes.
Okay.
I haven't sent, and I probably, the question is, who do I send them to? I didn't send them to Amy. They're still in red line and I have to accept all those and make sure I haven't screwed something up, but who should I send them to get them posted?
Send what you have done and I will get posted whatever you have done.
All right.
I mean, I've got 2 weeks before my class starts and
Okay.
that's the only reason I'm leaving.
All right.
is
All
'cause
right.
I have a class,
Yep.
so.
I will get them to you in the next couple days.
Sure, no problem.
So,
So I have meetings. I'd like to see if we get the meeting minutes from the 27th, January 27th adopted.
great, we can do that in just 1 second.
Yep.
I did want to let you know that the town technology person is going to transfer the advisory Zoom account into my name. So I will be actually hosting the meeting and setting it up in the future. I don't know if it'll be next week's meeting. It might be the one after that, since Amy's still available for next week's meeting. And anything that we don't get posted to the town website on the agenda, Carol Green has very graciously offered to either give me access so I can post it, or she said she will post it for me until we can get a new assistant hired. I was able to get about 6 or 7 people who were interested in the assistant position by posting it on the community page yesterday, and I have forwarded them all the job posting, so hopefully they will apply for the job and we can move fairly quickly with getting a replacement. But it might be an interesting spring season without an assistant, so not sure how that's going to work, but we'll figure it out and we'll make it happen. Okay. Anybody have any questions before we move on to the minutes?
I just want to say welcome again to Jamil. I know it's your first meeting, and probably a lot in your first meeting, but please feel free to reach out to any of us.
Yeah.
Thank you. Happy to be here and looking forward to participating. Thank you for having me.
Jamil, was it what you expected?
More or less. Okay. Really enjoyed the chance to sit in and participate. So happy to be here.
Great. All right. So David, if you want to move forward
Sure.
with your minutes.
I'd like to make a motion to accept the meeting minutes from the January 27th, 2021 meeting.
Seconded.
In the president, second.
Again, you're gonna have to call the vote, Susan. So I think Brian's offering to second right there.
I'll second.
Picky, geez.
I thought you were going to get everything right, Susan.
Oh, I already told you I was going to get it all wrong. Okay. I call for the vote. All in favor of approving the minutes from January 27th, Brian Beachkowski.
Aye.
David Lutz.
Aye.
Michael Huff.
Aye.
Kristen Baelish.
Aye.
Jonathan Hurwitz.
Aye.
Jamil Siddiqui.
Aye.
Jackie Katz.
Aye.
Kiara Moore.
Aye.
Okay. Thank you. Minutes
Susan, I do like the way you call the roll because it means Kristen isn't always first, and she's very excited about that too.
So it changes because I call the roll in order of where you're popping up on my Zoom screen.
There we go.
So that's how I call it. Are there any more, or is that the only one?
That's it. I think we're
Okay.
up. I think we're up to date. I have to double check, but I think we're up.
All right, so be on the lookout for the link for the B1 presentation for next week. Meeting is at 7 o'clock. Please do your best to have watched that presentation ahead of time and let me know if there are any issues with your attendance or watching the meeting or any of that that doesn't work. And I guess I will take a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
No further questions.
Second.
All right, motion to adjourn. Thank you. See you guys next week.